There are wounds that bleed quietly, and then there are wounds that echo. The night my father called me his mistake, the echo was louder than the music playing in the background, louder than the clinking glasses, louder than the polite laughter of 40 relatives gathered under one decorated roof. It was my grandmother's 70th birthday. The house looked beautiful. Golden lights wrapped around the pillars, fresh white roses on every table, the scent of cardamom and roasted lamb drifting through the air. Everything felt warm except me. I stood near the far end of the long dining table, trying to make myself smaller, as I had learned to do over the past few years. My father stood at the head of the table like he always did. Straight posture, expensive suit, a glass of sparkling cider in his hand. Beside him sat his wife, Layla, glowing in soft blue silk, her smile polished and controlled. She noticed me watching. She smiled wider. When it was time for speeches, the room quieted. My father cleared his throat, tapping his glass lightly with a spoon. To family, he began, to legacy, to the sacrifices we make so the next generation can thrive. Everyone nodded. A few clapped softly. He was good at speeches, good at sounding wise, good at looking like a devoted family man. I've worked hard my entire life, he continued. Everything I built was for my family, for my children. My stomach tightened at the word children. He rarely used it anymore. Sometimes, he said, swirling his drink, you get exactly what you prayed for, and sometimes you get a lesson instead of a blessing. A few cousins laughed lightly, unsure if it was a joke. His eyes found mine, locked, unmoving. Not every child turns out the way you hoped, he added. Some are mistakes. The room stilled, my hands froze around my fork. Then he said it, clear, deliberate, unshaken. You're my mistake. The words did not shout, they sliced. The fork slipped from my fingers and hit the porcelain plate with a sharp, ringing sound. 40 heads turned toward me, not him. Not the man who had just dismantled his daughter in front of an audience. Me, my aunt coughed awkwardly. One cousin whispered something that made another smirk. My uncle looked down at his food as if it had suddenly become fascinating. No one said, that's enough. No one said, she's your daughter. No one stood up. Layla gently placed her manicured hand on my father's arm, as if calming him, but her lips curved in something that wasn't sympathy. It was victory. I felt heat crawl up my neck, but my body felt strangely cold. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, to list every achievement he had ignored, the scholarships, the long nights studying, the job I earned without his connections. Instead, I heard my own voice, small and distant. Excuse me. I walked away before my tears could betray me. In the bathroom, I locked the door and gripped the edge of the sink. My reflection stared back at me, wide eyes, trembling lips, the same face he once kissed goodnight when I was little. What changed? After my mother died, he used to sit beside my bed and promise that no matter what, we would always have each other. I believed him. I built my whole world around that promise. Then Layla came. At first, she was gentle. She brought him tea. She laughed at his stories. She called him strong, important, admirable. Somehow, I became the opposite of all those things. Standing there in the bathroom, I realized something painful and clear. He didn't say those words because he lost control. He said them because he felt safe enough to. Safe enough to humiliate me. Safe enough to discard me. Safe enough because he thought I would stay. I wiped my tears carefully, fixed my makeup, and stared at myself one last time. 40 people heard him call me a mistake, but what none of them knew was this: mistakes don't stay silent forever. Pain has a strange way of sharpening your senses. After that night, the night of 40 witnesses, and one sentence that rewrote my place in the family, I stopped crying. Not because it didn't hurt anymore, but because something inside me had shifted. Tears felt useless. Observation felt powerful. I began watching, not my father, her. Layla had mastered invisibility in plain sight. She never raised her voice, never argued publicly, never insulted me directly. In fact, she often did the opposite. "Oh, sweetheart," she would say gently at family lunches, "you look tired. Are you sleeping enough?" It sounded like concern. It wasn't, it was positioning. Every comment about me carried a quiet suggestion. Unstable, ungrateful, difficult. She planted seeds in conversations, the way gardeners bury roots. deep enough that no one sees them growing. And my father watered them. I noticed how he started repeating her language, words he never used before. "You're too emotional. You create unnecessary drama. Why can't you be more understanding?" Understanding of what? Of being replaced. The more I tried to explain myself, the more I looked defensive. The more defensive I looked, the more I proved her narrative. It was brilliant and cruel. The truth found me on an ordinary Tuesday evening. I had stopped by their house to drop off some documents my father needed. Layla greeted me with her usual polished smile and told me he was upstairs on a call. I waited in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, staring at the marble tiles that had replaced the old wooden floor my mother loved. Layla's phone buzzed on the kitchen island. Once, twice, she had gone upstairs to shower. The screen lit up again. And there it was. My name. I didn't mean to look, but I did. Once she's completely out of the picture, you'll finally have him without guilt. My pulse thudded in my ears. I told myself to step away. Instead, I picked up the phone. The passcode wasn't difficult. She used my father's birthday. The irony almost made me laugh. Message after message scrolled upward like a confession. He feels guilty easily. I just remind him how stressed he is because of her. She plays the victim well, but I'm better. He wants peace. I make him believe she's the chaos. She's just collateral damage. Collateral damage. I stared at the words until they blurred. There were months of conversations with her friend, detailed strategies, subtle manipulations, even rehearsed phrases she planned to say during arguments. She studied my father like a project. He needs admiration more than logic. If I stroke his ego, he'll defend me every time. And then the line that hollowed me out completely. Watch, soon he'll believe she was always the mistake. The air felt too thin. So it wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't frustration. It wasn't disappointment. It was design. My hands shook, but not from sadness. From clarity. I took screenshots, every conversation that mentioned me, every calculated sentence. I sent them to my own phone. Forwarded copies to a secure drive, recorded timestamps. I didn't cry, not once. Instead, I remembered the bathroom mirror. The echo of porcelain against ceramic. The silence of 40 relatives who chose comfort over truth. I placed her phone back exactly where it had been. When she returned, wrapped in a silk robe, she smiled at me as if nothing in the world had shifted. "Still waiting?" she asked sweetly. "Yes," I replied, and for the first time I smiled back, not a wounded smile. Not a pleading one, a knowing one. She thought she was the director of this story. She thought I was the disposable character. What she didn't realize was that she had just handed me the script, and I had always been better at reading between the lines. Revenge, I was learning, doesn't rush. It waits, it gathers. It prepares. She believed she had erased me slowly, carefully, invisibly. But she forgot one important thing. Collateral damage still leaves evidence. The second invitation arrived 3 months later. Another family gathering, another long table, another performance disguised as celebration. My father and Layla were hosting their wedding anniversary dinner. 10 years of love and unity. The message read, 40 guests again. The same 40, most likely. The same faces that watched me shrink. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to decline, protect my peace, let them have their perfect evening without disruption. But then I remembered the sound of my fork hitting porcelain, and I typed one word, coming. Preparation is a quiet form of power. I didn't tell anyone what I was planning. I didn't rehearse speeches in the mirror. I didn't fantasize about screaming or humiliating her the way she had orchestrated my humiliation. No, this wasn't about rage. This was about truth. I organized every screenshot into a folder, arranged them chronologically, highlighted key phrases. I even backed them up twice, just in case. My hands were steady the entire time. The night of the dinner, I dressed carefully, not to impress, but to armor myself. A simple black dress. Minimal jewelry, hair tied back, calm face. When I arrived, the house looked even more extravagant than before. Crystal chandeliers shimmered. Music played softly in the background. The same scent of expensive perfume and slow-roasted food filled the air. and the same 40 relatives filled the room. Some glanced at me with mild curiosity, others avoided eye contact. A few offered polite smiles, as if the last gathering had never happened. Layla approached first. "You came," she said warmly, kissing my cheek. "That makes me so happy." Her voice was smooth, controlled, practiced, wouldn't miss it. I replied. My father joined us moments later. He looked slightly uncomfortable but masked it with a firm nod. "Glad you decided to behave tonight," he muttered quietly, just loud enough for me to hear. Behave as if dignity was rebellion. Dinner unfolded predictably. Toasts, compliments, stories about loyalty and partnership. Layla laughed at all the right moments. My father held her hand like a man proud of his choice. Halfway through the evening, after dessert plates were cleared, my father stood to speak. 10 years, he began proudly. 10 years of choosing the right person. Applause, he continued, voice thick with self-importance. Life teaches you who brings peace into your home and who brings complications. A few relatives chuckled softly. Then he glanced at me. Some people, he added, never learn their place. The room shifted. I felt the old sting trying to rise, but it didn't reach me. Because this time, I was ready. I stood slowly. "Actually," I said clearly, "I brought something to celebrate your 10 years too." Curiosity flickered across faces. Before anyone could question me, I walked to the television mounted on the wall. I had already noticed the HDMI cable earlier. My phone connected within seconds. The screen lit up. The first screenshot appeared. Silence, Layla's name at the top. Her message below, "He's easiest to guide when you make him feel admired." A few people leaned forward. The second screenshot replaced it. "She plays the victim well, but I make him see she's the chaos." A murmur spread through the room. My father frowned. "What is this?" I didn't answer. The third screenshot appeared. "She's just collateral damage." The words seemed to echo louder than his insult months ago. Layla's face drained of color. "This is private, incalculated," I said calmly. I scrolled further. "If I remind him how stressed she makes him, he'll distance himself on his own." Gasps. My aunt covered her mouth. One cousin whispered, "Oh my God." My father looked from the screen to his wife, confusion cracking into realization. "You said she was unstable," he whispered to Layla. She stepped toward him. "They're taken out of context." I pressed play. An audio recording filled the room, her voice unmistakable. "Men with guilt are the easiest to manage. Just feed their ego, and they'll choose you every time." The illusion shattered in real time. 40 witnesses again, but this time I wasn't the one shrinking. I turned toward my father. "I was never your mistake," I said quietly, steady. "You were manipulated, and I let you believe it." His eyes were wet now. The room wasn't laughing anymore. It was watching him. The silence that followed wasn't just awkward. It was seismic. 40 pairs of eyes were on my father. 40 hearts suddenly reconsidering what they had assumed was truth. Layla's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, trying to find words that could undo the undeniable. But there were none. Words, after all, are powerless against recorded evidence, against the cold clarity of someone else's intentions laid bare. My father sat frozen, the color drained from his face. Pride, the trait he had wielded like armor for decades, had failed him. It shattered quietly, like glass falling onto marble. He looked at Layla, then at me, and for the first time he seemed small. Vulnerable, human. I felt no glee in that moment, no thrill of victory. What I felt was something more profound, liberation. For years I had carried the burden of someone else's choices, someone else's manipulations. I had tried to earn his love, prove my worth, survive in the shadow of his judgment. And in all those years, I had forgotten what it felt like to exist outside of someone else's narrative. Tonight that narrative was mine. Layla, realizing she had lost control, tried to interject. "It's not what it looks like." I held up a hand. "Calm, quiet, stern. It is exactly what it looks like, and everyone can see it now." A murmur ran through the room. Cousins who once snickered when I stumbled in conversation now looked embarrassed. Aunts who had averted their eyes the last time now studied the betrayal laid bare. Some nodded subtly at me. Allies, finally, who had been silent witnesses before. My father opened his mouth, probably to apologize, probably to blame, probably to reclaim some shred of dignity. I didn't give him the chance. I forgive you, I said softly. My voice didn't shake, didn't break. Not because I forget, but because I refuse to carry your mistakes any longer, and I don't need you to define who I am. He blinked, stuttered, but I kept speaking, letting the truth I had held for months settle like snow over the room. I was never your mistake, you were mine. The mistake you made was believing her words over your own child, over your own family. That's your lesson, not mine. The words landed and stayed. No laughter, no denial, just the sharp clarity of truth. I turned away, not angrily, not vindictively, but deliberately, like closing a door that had stayed open for far too long. Layla's face twisted with a mixture of disbelief and fear. She realized that in her attempt to control, she had underestimated me, and underestimating me had been her first and final mistake. The relatives watched quietly, some shocked, some relieved, some silently apologetic. I could feel their empathy now, their recognition that I had endured too long in silence. It didn't matter that it took months, that it required evidence, or that it humiliated others. The truth had weight and it had power. My father didn't speak again that night, Layla didn't. Even the music seemed quieter, as if the house itself recognized that something profound had shifted. I collected my belongings, moved toward the door, and glanced back one last time. My father's eyes met mine. There was shame there, regret, maybe even fear, but there was no undoing what had been revealed, no rewriting of history. Goodbye, I said softly, and I left. Outside, the night air was cold but sweet. I felt it brush against my cheeks like a blessing. For the first time in years, I breathed without waiting for someone else to approve. I walked down the steps, not backward, not hesitant, but forward. Every step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Every step was freedom. Revenge, I realized, isn't always about making someone suffer. It's not always about proving a point or seeing justice served in the eyes of the guilty. True revenge is quieter, more profound. It is dignity restored. It is power reclaimed. It is walking away without needing anyone to cheer, without needing validation, without needing their love to survive. I forgave them because I no longer needed them. And in that forgiveness, in that liberation, I finally understood what it meant to be whole again. I was not the mistake. I was the lesson. I was the truth. And I would never let anyone write my story but me.